We are live.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to SpacePlace number 147. 147. Can't talk straight today.
One for
Uh,
severance.
1 for severance of
We're
the
severing that
tax rate.
tax.
We're going to severing the tax rate on Cardano with some pirate governance today, courtesy of the one and only Andrew Westberg this morning, dropping a bomb of a nerd out video, and then pulling a governance action out of his hat to slash the tax rate on Cardano from the current 20% down to the minimum constitutionally allowed of 10%. So that's pretty cool. Welcome, Andrew, and we got Mike Hornan here to fill us in on the constitutionality of Andrew's renegade actions here. So welcome, guys.
What's happening? Yeah, it kind of started. I'll give a little bit of background. It started as just a crazy idea. Of course, I'm the one that's out in front, but there was a whole lot of people behind the scenes that helped with this governance action. I don't want to call them out unless they want to out themselves. But yeah, I didn't really have a lot of input on the rationale. Like other people did all the math. Had a lot of people checking on everything for me. But yeah, I agreed to just push it out because sometimes it's good to shake things up on Cardano and it makes the place fun. So we decided to do the treasury cut parameter. We decided to not follow any of the standard processes for putting it on chain. Like there was no info action, there was no discussion on the forum ahead of time. Just purely the minimum required by the blockchain is what we wanted to try. And that's what we did. So sometimes it's fun to just throw a grenade and see what happens.
So far, the reaction's been interesting, fun to watch.
Yeah, I've seen reactions on both sides. I didn't even realize before we put the governance action up, but today was actually the every 3-week parameter committee meeting. So that was really interesting and tense.
That wasn't planned. Then
That was
completely accidental.
No, it was unplanned, and then I show up to the parameter committee meeting where I just had violated everybody's rules and standard operating procedures. So there was a few people upset. They mostly held their tongues, but you could tell they were like, "Urgh." But no, it was
a fucking playground. We're gonna play on it. Shit, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was a little bit slacking on sending out invites. So, Rick, I sent you an invite. B, Circarin, Ryan, sent you guys invites. There's a few invites out there floating around. So if anybody wants to hop in, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, please do. We'd love to have chat. Let's hear people's opinions. Let's start the debate. My opinion is something like this is going to force fiscal responsibility. After reviewing the Cardano budget, I haven't had a time to really comment it on depth in the forum. I'll take that initiative to do so soon. But damn, there's so much bloat in this budget. If we allow this to move forward, we'll never get rid of it. And so if you increase staking rewards for everybody, yeah, it's good, great for the ecosystem. It's great for everybody. It's going to increase the ADA, the circulating supply of ADA, but it's also going to force a good look at the budget because it should put a little downward pressure on net change limit as well as how much we want to get into circulation in light of that. So I think it's going to force, hopefully it does pass, and I'm for it. I'm 100% for it. It's going to force some really good, hard looking at what we're spending our money on. So that's my opinion.
Yep. And it's important to note too. There's also there's 1.67 billion aid in the treasury right now. So we're not taking that away. This is just.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. We've got, I was doing it naively at 1.5 billion, right? Even if we took out a full 350 million every year and added nothing more to the treasury, that's 4.25 years worth of runway. So like if we can't make the treasury work for us and make this self-sustaining, and we're still going to be putting in, even if this goes through, on the order of about 150 million per year will still be getting backfilled in. So we still have a good probably 5 to 10 years worth of treasury, and then hopefully price appreciation and hopefully responsible spending, to where, you know, this probably has almost a zero impact, all things considered. So
Yeah, that was one of the original intents, is like I was thinking this would be an uncontroversial change. Or I mean, there's definitely more controversial, parameters out there. We could have been discussing K again. We could have been, you know, talking about any of the other stake pool operator parameters would have been way more controversial to throw up there. But this one was just like, hey, we got a giant treasury. Do we need to keep throwing money into that treasury? Or can we maybe try backing it off a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So,
You know what? I also think this is going to create one of the first issues that D-reps are voting on that could potentially cause them to significantly lose their delegation, right? Like to shift and induce a change in delegation. It's a contentious issue. You know, I know if a D-rep votes no on this, I got ammo to go after him and come on and try and get some more, stake. D-reps are like that. Like, got to have a good case to vote yes or no.
yeah, well, hopefully nobody's going after anybody based on how they vote on this one. That would be kind of counterintuitive to a productive democracy if we go
I
and
think it's
take out
gonna
the
get-
torches and pitchforks every single time there's a vote and you don't vote the way we want you to. That's kind of bullying and strongman tactics that aren't generally pro-democratic. So it's
with
perfectly
you.
okay to disagree. I liked what Andrew said this morning in his video, that essentially this number was just pulled out of a hat. The research actually says that the treasury rate should be about 5% to be like sustainable. But there was this push early on in the Shelley era to build the treasury up a little bit and have it be ready to go. And Charles also said this in his live stream on Twitter a little bit ago. The goal of the 20% was initially just to fill it up, but now is it filled up enough that we can start to taper it down and live off of what's in there? So we tolerate a lower amount and procedurally work our way towards maybe a 0% treasury tax rate if we become a fully self-sustaining ecosystem.
I mean, Adam, in an ideal world, I would agree with you. Like, we don't want to encourage shitting on people for how they vote. But just practically, and particularly since we're potentially introducing the concept of D-rep pay, we saw how SPOs treated each other for no damn reason. And I think we're going to see history repeat.
low drama is not the Cardano way.
That's true.
Yeah, I want to hear from some of the people that we've got here that are D-reps. Like, I want to hear from Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm about halfway head over heels in the budget right now, going through and kind of critiquing everything I see. I kind of feel bad. I feel like I'm, just calling someone's baby ugly over and over again. But I mean, my intent is kind of just to call out the things I see them and be honest, right? Like, I guess my vision for the first budget, right, is to be as minimalist as possible and just spend money on the things we need to spend them on and not spend anything more. So I don't know, rather than setting an arbitrary number like we need to spend it within this limits, let's just spend as little as possible. This is the very first budget. Figure out how to get all the processes and the audits and the tracking and the transparency and get that right first with small amounts of ADA, right? Maybe we just get like just the things we need. And then we maybe the next one we can add a couple more things and we kind of scale it up as we go. So I'm, I guess way more minimalist than most people. A lot of people seem to be pretty positive about the budget. I mean, I'm not negative about it, but I'm not positive about it either. I think most of the things I have are critiques. There's still a lot of good things in there, but a lot could be improved as well. So I don't know.
You could
That's my
easily
2 cents. Two
cut
Lovelaces.
50 to 75 million ADA out of it and be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's definitely some exaggerated numbers. There's some numbers where nobody really knows because we've never done this as an ecosystem, like how much we want to spend on marketing or how much we want to spend on core development, because we haven't had insight into how much IOG has been burning, or CF, or anybody else really, how much they've been spending for development for the last 10 years or so. So we don't have visibility into that. So it's really hard to go, well, what is a good number to spend on core development, right? So there's definitely some of that where I think we're going to get it wrong for sure this first year. And it's also it can also be hard, right? Like when we're in the technical steering committee and I'm surrounded by kind of like fellow nerds and people that are highly technical and invested in Cardano, everything kind of sounds like a cool idea and you're like, yeah, we should totally do that. Yeah, we should totally do that. Like, yeah, like these are all good ideas. So where do you draw the line in terms of like, okay, but you guys, like, we can't just give a blank check and do all the things, right? Maybe we do need
Exactly.
to say, hey, cap that and postpone that until next year, maybe, so but it is hard, and so sometimes this is why I love that we finally got the budget out to the public, is that now we can actually get that pushback from the outside to where independent people that aren't in these meetings all day in and day out can actually be like, hey, what are you guys actually thinking here? And then we have to justify it, and that can actually help refine, hopefully we'll refine all the committee's thinking and thought process, and not just sign a blank check because these are my buddies and it sounds like an okay idea, but let's actually get critical with some of these proposals, and do we really need them to advance the ecosystem forward?
And some of the things that I think should not be in the budget are things that make particular entities more competitive. An example would be Catalyst has a budget for itself. There's overhead and there's profit margin in that budget. And then there's separate line items for a new platform and things like that, right? Pay for that out of your own overhead to keep yourself competitive, because they could use some competition. And then the same thing with Intersect. There's line items for increased communications and increased transparency and helping me figure out my fucking taxes. And it's like, guys, if you can't figure that shit out on your own overhead, we shouldn't have to pay for that shit. It should come out of your operational cost. So there's a whole lot of crap in there that I see as just it's pork, it's FUD, it's people with their hands in the cookie jar, and I like it.
Yeah, the line item where there's a line item for us paying for them to prepare their taxes. What are you talking? What?
Well, and actually, it's to fund a working group to tell them how to hire a CPA, to tell them how to file their taxes. So yeah, like we got that, I guess. But yeah, that was one that Ryan was also critical. I've been following his thread as he's been adding to it, and Patrick Tobler did a pretty good one the other day as well, kind of going through line by line and bucket by bucket and committee by committee, and pointing out what they like and pointing out mostly what they dislike. But I think that's where we are in the process right now. We're at there's a whole bunch of shit we got to chop, so that way we can refine and then identify. Basically, by the process of not cutting it, we'll pick out the most preferred winners or losers that way. What was that comment, Trim? I didn't even see it. Budget will suffer greatly during the bear. In that case, though, when it's really time to build. So
yeah, if it's a percentage of the revenue generated during the year, then when activity slows down, the budget slows down. It's kind of like a heat death, right? So when you really want to step on the gas and like prepare and keep building, you won't be able to if it's a percentage of fees.
Well, I was thinking more percentage of what's in the treasury right now, so we can spend up to 10 or 20% of what's there. So it actually long tails out, just like the monetary expansion has done since the Shelley hard fork at the whatever it is, 3% per annum or whatever we're dripping out at. But yeah, that is a good point, right? Like, because yeah, when economic activity is down, if we're having to live within our means, then it becomes a reinforcing flywheel of a death spiral versus a flywheel of actually like promoting economic activity.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Keynesianism and modern monetary theory, but it's I do think that there is something to that, especially within the confines of a blockchain and the bear bull cycles that we're going through. It's really important to stay competitive. It's really important to build momentum, and yeah, like I don't know. I want to be responsible with everything that we spend, but I'm much more concerned about losing momentum because Cardano is already, in a slightly isolated position, and we shouldn't take for granted that we're going to succeed by just like keeping the lights on. We do need to really push for it, and hard truth of the world is to push for it, we got to pay people, because that's what everyone else is doing. And when you're competing with someone who's cheating, then we got to take that into account, at least how we are going to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I think it was from Chris O. Suggested it on X, formerly known as Twitter, earlier today. And he was like, yeah, okay, like decrease taxes by 10%. But his initial response was, okay, take that other 10% and put it straight into stablecoin liquidity pumping, basically. And then somebody was like, well, then we get no benefit to staking and SPOs and everything. So maybe only 5% goes into stablecoin liquidity. It's an interesting question. I kind of question whether or not we have enough even in our entire treasury to really move the needle in terms of stablecoin liquidity depth.
It's kind of tricky. I won't say too much about this since I have a vested interest in it. I can't really, but it's a little tricky because when you start to say, okay, stablecoin, you've gone out of the realm of decentralized blockchain, and you're now asking a centralized entity to play a role. And so it's tricky. So you almost need a custodian to manage the minting and burning of stablecoins. And then I'm getting echo. I don't know if...
Yeah, me too.
Is that Chris, you? Are you... Okay. Yeah, so you need a custodian, and then it's like, okay, well, now you've got to worry about how much do you pay the custodian? Do you allow them to be a market maker? Do you allow them to be... How aggressive of a market maker do you allow them to be? Do you allow them to really make a ton off of the Cardano community? It opens up a whole lot of other questions. It's not as simple as just moving this money over to this other bucket. And also, what if Cardano goes way up after you've swapped a ton of ADA into a stable coin?
We can use algorithmic stablecoins.
Algorithmic stablecoins are not capital efficient, though. So it requires 4 times the ADA to mint $1 of JED. So you can do that, but it's not going to be super capital efficient.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't technically, though, because in the case of JED, right, the Shen reserve token is technically a long ADA token, right? So if you allocate a certain part of the treasury to literally mint Shen, then that's still sort of redeemable for ADA. And then actually going from ADA into the JED token, you don't have to over collateralize that. That is a 1-to-1, right? So you just cash out without actually selling. So you end up with a bunch of JED for payments. And then you have to, like, in order to actually use that, you have to then go through, something like USDM, but that's a stable to stable pair. Someone could come in and, market make that and make a pretty decent buck, I would say. Like, literally just supplying dollars on one side to mint USDM, sell it for JED, redeem it for ADA, or sort of, do some trading there.
You can't have if you have the dollar-backed stables only used as the off-ramp, they will quickly die, because there's then no treasury. If all that's ever happening is just burning every bit, then those companies won't be able to make it. So there has to be actually more minting pressure on the dollar-backed stables just to keep them solvent, I guess.
I think with JED, there's a couple other issues too. With like, there's the Cody fees that when it comes to minting, and there's also the stake pool choice that they get staked to for the Shen reserve.
Yeah. No, I'm not advocating for the current version.
Yeah. Well, somebody also has to be in charge of the bucket of Shen, and they will have incentives. When it's the right time to burn that Shen, and if you just say the treasury owns the Shen, then it's like, you're removing that person's profit incentive. So there still needs to be somebody that makes a decision of when to mint and burn, even when you're dealing with an algorithmic.
Yeah, this concept that like we'll just take funds directly out of the treasury and just kind of like zap it into a min swap LP farm and then sit on it and then never do anything. People are like, oh no,
Somebody's got to make those
this is going to
fees.
issue yield to the Cardano community, right? But it also has to pay yield to whoever is.
So that's
somebody has to own that wallet, right? And control that.
Yeah, that's another big point of contention is which decks do you deposit it to, right? Like there's a whole bunch of different decks.
Yeah, there's king making winners and losers all over this thing. It's not as cut and dry as just take money out of the treasury and put it in USDM.
If you do have that, you could dump it all in one DEX and it will flow to wherever the users are. So that's not like it'll arbitrage its way to where the activity is happening.
I think it would be cool if we had like some of that protocol owned liquidity stuff that Fallen Icarus has been talking about, where a bunch of different dexes could borrow against the same, or not borrow, trade against the same liquidity. But I don't think we have that yet. So
that would be very cool.
No.
No. Mike has put his foot down. In other news, Mike is actually going to become the dictator, the benevolent dictator for life of SanchoNet later tonight. So thank you to Sam for helping to facilitate that. And you said you have a couple other SPOs that are taking over it with you as well, Mike. To like, it's going to be completely community run testnet now at this point.
Yeah, 100% community run, but single person controlled so far. But yeah.
Sometimes benevolent dictator, like I realize we're decentralization maxis here, but sometimes benevolent dictator is the right way to go to actually get shit done. I'm sorry, I know people hate to hear that, but sometimes it's just easier.
It is effective.
Yeah.
Shout out to 1%. Everybody's screaming that he was going to be a crazy guy, but he just kind of did his thing and floated off, didn't he?
He's still collecting min UTXO on like 30 something flipping stake pool, so
Well,
I would be floating off with a Mai Tai in my hand on a beach somewhere as well if I was him.
I don't think he's floated off. I think he's right here with us. I think he's somebody that we don't know.
Yeah.
He's got to be.
I kind of want to hear from Mark since he joined us today. We don't get to hear from him very often. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
All good. I was quite surprised that you pushed the proposal before the end of the voting period on the new constitution.
Yeah, we actually discussed that internally, but it was, man, I'm still getting feedback. There we go. Yeah, so we discussed it internally, and we're like, well, it's a valid proposal on either the interim constitution or the new constitution. So we're just like, yeah, let's pull the trigger. We just wanted to have some fun.
So do you expect the vote to pass? Is there anybody here?
I have no idea. I don't care which way it goes, to be honest. I just felt really strongly that the community should give consent to what the tax rate is. That was my big reason for doing it. Like, if it doesn't pass, hey, great. We've affirmed that 20% is what it should be. And, if it passes, great, then 10% is what it should be. And if they vote no, somebody else can put in a 15% or a 25 or a 30, staying within the guardrails for now. Or somebody can change the guardrails if they want to. They could put in a change and say minimum treasury is 0. And then we can vote on that, It's... I think it's important just to rip the Band-Aid off and say, these are real parameters. We can really have a say in it. The community is in charge of the blockchain.
And this is a parameter that everybody can understand and relate to, right? So
that was great
conversation.
Yeah, it's very simple.
Take a very high technical level of understanding to go, do you want 20% taxes or 10% taxes, and here's what that does. So I think it's interesting.
A high tax or a lower tax, but it's still a high tax.
The current votes are no for with 153 million ADA, and yes with 23 million ADA. So far, it seems that people are against reducing the taxes.
Well, actually not, because important clarification there. Like 120 of that is voted or delegated to no confidence. So those people don't like anything about governance and will vote no on everything except for burn it all to the ground. So that's where that current no percentage comes from.
We only have 6.16 million ADA that have voted explicitly no currently, and I'll drop that link in the end.
So, and there's 24 million yes. So if the ratio holds the same, which it won't, because it's still really early, that's about 80%.
Well, what I'm
in
seeing,
favor.
yeah, what I'm seeing is that a lot of the Twitter D-reps are eyeing towards no, and I think a lot of that has to do with honestly lack of visibility of what's really happening on the ground. But then again, who knows? I don't know what delegators are saying. Yeah, I listened to constituents on this one. That's directly affecting everybody's pocketbook.
Yeah, it's also an interesting game theory that inertia is a real thing. And we know for a fact that this parameter at 20% for the last 5 years has worked. And so getting people to say, do something different is harder than just saying, oh, just keep it all the same.
Yeah, that's true. The safety, the better the devil you know, than what happens if we go to 10%. But yeah, to that end, and kind of to Mark's point, it's been kind of interesting to see, because there's a reason we called this pirate governance, and it's because Andrew just kind of came out of left field, surprised everybody with the governance action, didn't go through what some people might call like proper channels or like a socialization period or whatever. And that was somewhat intentional to be a little bit disruptive and see what happens. So you can't wait until XYZ proposal finishes, unless it's actually like a requirement of your proposal that be settled one way or another. But um, this question of, oh well, should you have waited until net change limit and the budget are settled and done? Well, those aren't even proposed on chain yet, right? Those are forum posts that people are talking about. So yeah, there's this weird kind of natural tendency, I guess, to favor somebody in charge controlling that and rationing out the rate of information and activity that we need to do so that it doesn't overwhelm us. But in this case, anybody with the money, the ADA to place a deposit and submit a governance action can submit one at any time. And so we have to be ready to kind of parse that out and think about it. So it is a really interesting. It's no longer a thought experiment. It's a real experiment at this point. So
Yeah, that's something really nice that's introduced with plumbing, right? I mean, if you guys wanted to, if anyone wanted to, they could elect themselves for a specific group of people into an update committee and get up there with the ones that's there right now. There's no election or anything or any process that's required. You could just put your governance action in there and try to do it. That just shows that everyone can do it. Everyone can openly submit their governance action, talk about it or not before doing it, and then we have to vote on it and decide if it passes or not. We have to embrace this.
yeah, and that was one of the big concerns for me, and one of the instant red flags that some people raised was, oh my goodness, this hasn't gone through the intersect parameters committee, of which Andrew happens to be, I think, a subject matter expert, not an actual member of that committee.
I show up
but
to the meetings. That's all I know.
Okay, but yeah, and so it was like, well, that's centralization if we're not allowed to submit a protocol parameter update unless you've gotten the blessing of this parameter committee. You know, there's this weird, we've been getting pushed, in my opinion, too far towards everything must happen and funnel through intersect, and that's been a very centralizing facet. So we need it to be okay for other people to propose their own budgets and get them potentially approved by DREPs and withdrawn from the treasury, like the Pragma Amaru proposal that they've been socializing since before the new year. The Cardano Atlantic Council, we're going to submit our own budget because we don't think that we should be paid by a fellow committee member to do any work on the Constitutional Committee if the general public views that as possible. But so we need to embrace decentralized governance, and anybody can propose what they want when they want, and it'll succeed or fail. Who was it? One of the cool guys on X that I talk to all the time, but
That
he's
was
like,
me.
well, I talk to you all the time too, yeah. But no, he was like, well, should I put up a proposal for contingent staking? And I was like, yeah, do it. Like we've had enough public debate that if you really want to draw attention to that issue, or you think it's valid, then do it. And if we vote yes, then I will make sure the TSC carves off some budget and we implement contingent staking if that's what the community wants. I don't see that being in danger of actually happening, but yeah, like you shouldn't need to ask anybody's permission to post a proposal on chain at any given time. So thank you, Andrew, for fearlessly leading the way on this one.
It's a sacrifice because I'm losing staking rewards for up to 30 days, man. It hurts.
I did the math. It was 208 or so. I will more than gladly buy you something.
You're good. It's totally worth the sacrifice.
Yeah, I think it's
How
right
much
around
is it gonna cost
250
you?
ADA.
What was that, Mark?
How much is it gonna cost you?
It cost 100,000 ADA to put the proposal on chain, and then that's locked until the proposal is completed. So you lose out on all the staking rewards for that ADA during the 30 days.
Yeah, but how
And-
much that is?
How much ADA that is?
How much revenue lost from staking?
We said about 250 ADA.
Okay, that's not that much.
Yeah,
No,
no, it's manageable, which is why when I did the very first one, the should we name the hard fork Hosky proposal, I ran the math and I was like, okay, I'm losing 250 ADA to have this deposit locked up for 30 days or 35 days, whatever it ends up being.
That's a lot of Hosky you could buy.
Yeah, but I mean, I was also thinking, well, I can now run a service and offer to loan that out, and I just charge people 500 ADA to put their, if they don't have 100,000 ADA, I can charge them 500 ADA to put up their proposal, and they will gladly do that because they don't have 100,000 to submit their action, and so that's where govaction.fund or
Isn't that
govaction.fund is an actual URL that I own. I just haven't actually developed it because I was mostly joking, but it might be a good idea if we keep it at this 100K rate for much longer.
isn't that the entire business model of Optim Finance? Like literally, that is what they do, right? Like you
I
can
don't think
borrow voting power.
I don't think they've created it where you can actually vote, get the deposit, because in this case, you actually do spend a UTXO and it goes away into a pot, and it comes back as rewards against the staking address. So it actually removes from the ledger to a rewards account or a deposit account.
I think Payton lost 100K this way because he didn't have the address.
Almost. It was within 12 hours that got saved.
Oh, okay.
And it was only because we were pre-Chang hard fork, because after the Chang hard fork, you have to actually sign a stake key registration with the stake key. But because luckily we were like a few days before the Chang hard fork, that ledger change, rule change hadn't gone into effect yet. And so Carlos from the IOG Cardano CLI team and Ryan Williams from Intersect were actually able to register his stake address just in time, like 12 hours to go before he would have lost all the funds, is when we had kind of discovered it. So there was an earlier proposal that we still just call the Ikigai proposal because it was published in Japanese and I think 12 or 16 other languages. They made the same mistake, but as far as I know, they have not come forward to claim that yet. But the civics committee, I want to say, has actually a 100K ADA line item in their budget to reimburse that reward address that did put up that proposal, because they were, I think, the second one to submit a gov action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in there. I just read it.
Is everybody here a DRAP except for me, or?
I'm not a DREP.
I'm not a DREP.
I'm not a D-rep.
I am not a DREP.
I'm not a DREP.
So Kyle
Wait,
is
just
the
me?
only DRAP here.
No,
Kyle is one too. Yes.
I'm a
Wait,
dirt.
Kyle's here. Okay, there's two of us.
I'm a dirt.
How much voting power do you have, Kyle?
I don't know, 17 and a half maybe. You want to give me some?
I delegate to Smoke, the
Well,
guy behind Pool PM.
go ask his ass how he's going to vote here, and then if
I already did. I'm waiting for an answer.
Okay, all right, good deal. You know what's up. You got till the end of the block. I'll give you I'll slip you my ID. See, I told you. People gonna be soliciting delegation.
That's funny.
What do you guys think about compensation for the DREPs?
I think no. Well, it should be
No.
done by the protocol later if we learn. This year, fuck no. Definitely not by Intersect. There's no way in hell that I think any centralized entity should be building a list of DREPs, first of all. And then second, every Intersect contract that I've ever seen has a non-disparagement clause in there. And so if you get DREPs under non-disparagement, they can't say shit. And that's not cool. So no.
Yeah, the other point I'd like to say about that is like it's kind of been understood that like, oh, everybody working for Intersect should be a full-time paid employee. And I'm like, you have the people running the network, the SPOs, like 5% of them are making enough to actually make a living at it. We're all volunteers. Like, I'm sorry, Intersect, you should be volunteers until the people running your network are actually making a living wage. That's my opinion.
I need to make a meme now. The "you guys are getting paid" meme.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I mean,
Just
like
use the same
we're
one
making
that,
sure that everybody's getting paid in Intersect, but like the SPOs, they're barely making enough to run their rigs. Like it is a volunteer hobby position at this point.
use that same meme template that fake Chuck did the other day when he leaked the budget of the one guy sitting under the pipe and just trying to catch the drips, and the big fat dude catching like the whole spray, and be like Intersect versus the SPOs.
Yeah.
According to Andrew Westberg, make sure you cite him as the person who said that. It wasn't me. I just came up with the idea. No, that is a good point though. Like there are people and entities and positions that have been getting paid either for the past year, for the past 7 years, to like full time do nothing but work on Cardano all day, every day, and they kind of feel, I guess, entitled to have that continue. Like it should just continue indefinitely without any sort of scrutiny on whether or not their job is redundant or necessary to the ecosystem. So there may be some rude awakenings there, and that might be also part of this entire budget process is who are we actually willing to pay to be a part of this network, and why, and then how much. So
Yeah, I think the original vision was anybody can run a stake pool, and it should be like at least a part-time job, where you spend time making sure you're up, making sure you're running, and you get compensated for that time. But like people complain that I run way too many stake pools, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of what it costs me in time, or even make it a full-time job, which is why I work for so many different companies in the Cardano ecosystem to actually make a living off of Cardano. I'm one of the few people lucky enough to make a living off of Cardano, and it's really, really hard still, even working all of these different jobs to try and kind of scrape together a living. So when somebody comes in and says, I want to sit on a committee and earn a full-time salary, like, it's like, come on, bro.
Are you still involved with Noom?
Yeah. No, I'm still involved with Noom. Mostly I have built up the team to be self-sufficient there, but I still run all the technical stuff. I've stepped back a little bit from the management side of it, but I still do all the technology, the vision, the planning, and I still jump in there and fix bugs. Like I helped push some songs out today.
So when will you release streaming?
Whenever we get enough money to buy a catalog to make it reasonable. So that's another one of the things that maybe the Treasury could help with. Like, you can't just do streaming and only have 150 songs on there, which is, about how many have been released through Noom itself. Like, we could do streaming with that, but it'd be not an interesting experience. What you really need, and we asked the founding entities for this, and they all said no. We're like, why don't you go out, you rent us a streaming catalog for a year or two, give us a catalog where we can put those into our app, stream it, give people a little better streaming rewards, and just play at the same level as all these other guys.
So how much would it cost per annum?
That's a great question for like Ryan or Florian. I'm not the money guy.
Okay.
But yeah, we sat down with the CF and we made that ask. They were like, that's not on our roadmap. That's not something we can do. But yeah, I mean, at some point it takes a lot of money to break into streaming, or it takes a whole lot of people releasing through our ecosystem. That's the other way streaming can go live.
Yeah, I think your Spotify Noom playlist is broken.
Yeah, that's been broken for a while. We had a guy volunteer that came in and he built that auto update, and I haven't gotten around to fixing it yet. But
then it's difficult to support you guys.
Yeah, it is difficult to support the project right now, just because you've got a lot of people working for Noom tokens, and a lot of the people that are there, are there because they believe in the project, not because it's earning money hand over fist for them. So it's the true believers that are still there and still grinding.
All right. Well, I want to interject and jump in here for a second, because Trim made a comment and then B picked up on it, and that is at some point, like during the December Christmas break, Sam, who used to be my doppelganger, cut his hair for some reason. So now you can actually tell us apart, and I can't pretend to be Sam Leathers at parties anymore, which has drastically hampered my social life. So what's going on, Sam? Welcome to the chat.
Hello. Yeah, so I went to the inauguration and figured I had to clean up, talking to like bigwigs there and whatnot. So I cleaned up, and it doesn't grow back very fast. So I got to wait a couple more years to catch back up to you now, Adam. But I figured I'd be controversial and putting my title here, coming in here as parameter committee subcommittee for the economic subcommittee head. So since we were talking about the new parameter being changed.
Yeah. So what was your experience from the parameter committee? And I realize it's probably Chatham House rules. What was the reception to a pirate gov action kind of like hitting the chain out of the blue and unexpectedly amongst the parameter committee?
So I was completely excited about it. There was some people in there that were like, you took us off off our foot there. We weren't ready for that one. But I thought it was awesome that people are actually submitting governance actions that are making people talk about these things. As head of the economic committee, we are going to be doing some analysis and look at Andrew's analysis and whatnot, and put out some sort of official comms on it. My opinion on this particular one, and one of the reasons I'm so glad you picked this one instead of K, is there is absolutely no like up or down answer on this one. It's a matter of giving the data and making sure all the DREPs are informed on what this means, how much that's going to slow the growth of the Treasury, what projections are going to look like over the next year, 5-year, 10-year range and whatnot. And basically just give them the numbers and say, hey, you guys need to decide. That's this. We gave you governance, figure it out. And I really appreciated Charles' video he did earlier today, where he basically did the same thing. And he looked like a kid in the candy store when he was on that video. He's like, yes, people are using my system.
I was pleasantly surprised at Charles's response. I mean, not really, but it just, you never know sometimes what's gonna, what could rub people the wrong way, and there's processes going on. That just made me so happy. Like, it was pretty awesome. I think it made everybody happy. Particularly, I'm sure Andrew thought that was awesome, and
And those that don't know, I mean, back in the day, I mean, he actually worked on Ron Paul's campaign trying to get him elected to president. So he's very financially conservative. So having this as one of the first actions, and having people talk about like how much value are we getting out of this treasury and what should this tax be, was just like highlighting to him. It's like, yes, this is the stuff I wanted to talk about at the US level. Now we can talk about it at our level.
That's exactly why we
Yep.
picked this one. And I'm going to out you, Chris. Chris is the one that actually wrote the rationale for that. So that his analysis is what you're going to be analyzing.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris, for doing that. It was awesome. He put in a
You
lot
said
of
no
time and
doxing.
effort on that. Yeah, I said I wouldn't dox him, but he's going to be cool with it. He needs some credit.
Well, thank you for taking the time to put that analysis together, and I look forward to analyzing it.
One of the things that I hope this encourages is some people to take a look at their interest in hovering around the treasury looking for a handout versus building the things that they were building before this was an issue. Because, I mean, there's a number. I don't know what that number is, but how many people have foregone projects that they were working on that could have been driving transaction volume and building new cool things on the chain? You know what I mean? But now they're hanging out around the treasury. I'm not knocking anybody. I mean, that's fine if that's the path you choose, but I think your time would be much more valuable spent on the chain itself.
well, the other thing too, one of the best things for this ecosystem was when Catalyst went dry for a year. All the parasites left.
Well, a lot of them. We still have some room to go, because
That's right.
there were some people that were well funded enough from Catalyst that they could survive that dry year. So like we still have work to do to not be a welfare or a nanny state, and instead be incentivizing people to be building products that drive transaction volume and revenue for themselves, so they don't need to just constantly have their hand out to Project Catalyst or to the treasury, and instead they make money based on the economic activity of their customers on chain, which rising tide floats all boats, right? So that's been my big push all morning since I watched Andrew's video and kind of saw this thing hit the chain, is kind of pushing back on those people that say this is too early, or that we have to wait and see what the budget looks like. No, like I think we should keep trying to lower the taxes. I know we have to do a constitutional amendment at this point to go any lower, but we should keep trying to go lower, because that's going to force everybody that's utilizing the treasury to be more agile and to really work to increase both transaction volume, to increase the GDP, and the tax revenue goes up if the tax revenue rate or the tax rate stays the same, or increase the value of the project, increase the ADA value, and then you can do 2 times as much with half the coins, right? So that should be the way that we're driving, not increasing and trying to have this giant Scrooge McDuck like vault of coins that just sit there and look shiny and we brag about them, but they don't actually do anything. So let's use this treasury smartly and intelligently to drive value and drive on-chain volume, so that it becomes an actual self-sustaining ecosystem. Because right now, as it stands, it's looking very much like a welfare. Everybody just wants to get paid and kind of limp along for a few more years, but there's not a clear path to profitability. And that's what scares me, and why I'm definitely in favor. If you're my D-rep, they are not on the call today, but if you are my D-rep and you're watching, then I'm in favor of voting yes on cutting the taxes and forcing us to get lean and mean, and match Viva on that treadmill. Let's put in some laps, being efficient.
So one of the things that you mentioned there is the word tax cut. And I think that's one of the best things you guys did about this action that was submitted on chain here, is that instead of using like technical jargon of how it appeals to people and like trying to talk about it from the perspective of Cardano, you brought in the language that people already understand outside. And that's not the first thought I would have had for changing Tau for the label of it. So, I mean, I think that was really smart on your guys' part.
Well, it's
Yeah.
actually, isn't it actually the on-chain parameter is tax cut or treasury cut or
It's
something like
called
that?
treasury cut.
Yeah, so it's
But,
the cut of the treasury, and we're cutting cutting it in half. Apparently,
Yeah.
with this action.
But the first draft was like treasury cut.
Yeah,
Tax cut is much better.
Yeah, the reasoning we wanted Chris, when he was writing the rationale, to be very much in the realm of the math and the effects on chain that he believed would happen. And then my video was kind of the other half of the rationale, which was much more of an emotional plea or looking at the history of governments, taxes, the concept of representative democracy, consent of the governed, from that perspective. So we kind of wanted to hit it from both angles. For the people that want to see the numbers, that's kind of where Chris went with it, and I went the other direction with it.
And the way you closed your video was awesome. I mean, it was a perfect kind of synopsis of the whole thing. It's like, the point is, it doesn't matter which way it goes. It matters that it was actually voted on, and now this tax rate is the will of the people, instead of some arbitrary number that was, thrown upon us.
And we're throwing a turd in this narrative that everything has to go through this centralized entity with process. You don't create a decentralized, ecosystem where anybody can, participate permissionless and then try to frame every fucking interaction in there. That's just not how we roll. It's not cool. So I think that this sets a pretty interesting precedent moving forward.
My Canadian government doesn't let me play with the taxes, or I don't have a say about it.
I don't think many of our governments allow us to have a say in the taxes. So this is definitely a new one where an average Joe citizen can just be like, I think tax rates should be cut in half, and then put it to a vote of the populace and see what happens. So yeah, it's a very kind of one of the neat things that we're experimenting with here is that, there are no gatekeepers, essentially.
They had a referendum about lowering taxes in Switzerland. Surprisingly, the people voted no.
I mean,
The people
somebody
in
made an obviously
Switzerland-
compelling as hell case for, whatever benefits they're getting on for those tax dollars.
You must actually get something for your taxes there.
Yeah.
Here, we don't get nothing.
You're gonna save me time writing the checks on my bills? Sure. That must have been it, right? Like, the fuck.
Yeah, even here when they proposed, I think they just proposed a tax cut like earlier today, and I already know that's not going to impact me. I'm still going to owe the same amount, whether or not like it's going to be for big corporations or people that are below me in income level. But yeah, generally speaking, even when they're proposing tax cuts, my amount that I owe the government stays the same. So
I'm still holding out hope that Doge axes the IRS and we just
too, man.
get like a fair tax.
Me too.
Can you send those guys over to Norway after, please?
I just want to be like other countries where they just send you a bill every. I just want to be sent a bill every year where they tell me what I owe and I pay it. Instead of
that's
like
probably my favorite meme. Like, okay, so how do you do your taxes? Well, you tell us how much you think you owe. Well, can't you just tell me? Well, we know, but we're not going to tell you. Like, so what happens if I get it wrong? Oh, you go to jail. Like, really? Like, if you already know, just send me a flipping bill and I'll pay the bill or work out a payment plan or something.
No, my thing is fair tax. Don't even have an entity. The entity just basically collects the payments and then you just embed it in the sales tax of everything you buy, because you can't dodge it. If you buy a $1 million house or if you buy a Lamborghini, you have to pay that tax, and you can't just like, oh, I'm just going to write that off and do this other thing and whatnot.
Yeah, like a flat rate sales tax or consumption tax or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely a fan of it, so it's equal across the board. There's no, what do you call it, write-offs or loopholes or anything else. Just everybody pays the same amount, and we get to a figure, and then we force the government to live within those means. So
Yeah, it's a little bit regressive. So I mean, I don't necessarily agree with this argument, but I want to make the argument anyway. Like, the flat tax is regressive because the lower income person pays a much bigger chunk of their income in taxes than the person buying Lamborghinis, where it's a tiny little fraction of their income goes to taxes. So it's maybe considered not necessarily fair.
I like this concept of land tax, where you just remove everything from economic activity, and then it's like, if you have land, you make sure that you make use of it, and then you're taxed on that. And if you don't make use of it, well, now there's no more housing crisis because people actually sell some of their land.
No, we actually have that as well. You have to pay the government every year to keep land that you allegedly own.
The key word there being as well.
Yeah.
You do it instead of, then everything becomes a lot simpler.
Well, you guys have nice countries. I usually pay 66% of my capital gain in taxes, and if it's revenue, it's 100%.
Well, don't worry. If we fix everything in the U.S. with our taxes, we'll just make America's evil top hat one of our states.
Yeah, we're gonna adopt you guys before we annex Greenland. So
We got you guys. We got you.
Yeah. Ask Adam to put a 25% fee raise on the smuggling maple sugar, maple syrup to the United States.
In interstate commerce, there are no rules on that because it's not allowed. So once you guys are the 51st state, you'll be able to just drive the maple straight down here, and no more problems.
Yeah, exactly.
No tariffs. Like, it's going to be good to go. Like, it's a win-win for Canada, honestly.
So what do we have to do? I just have to hand you over Trudeau, and you take care of him, and then you what?
No, you guys have to keep Trudeau. Like, we don't want him. So, like, you can keep him.
Didn't he already step down?
He said he's going to step down, like, during the next election. Or
Yeah.
like, he's not running for re-election or whatever sort of thing. So we're getting all sorts of like strange tax insights from Norway and the Netherlands and everything else here in the chat. It's pretty cool to see. So.
Well,
by the way, Tezos, Cosmos, and Polkadot all have a effective tax rate of around 2%, 1 to 2%. FYI. Food for
1
thought.
to 2. Okay.
Yeah, Sam, were you part of your initial guardrails parameter setting?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did we settle on 10 being the lowest that the Treasury tax rate could go? Because the research that I've seen and been pointed to says that 5 would actually be like the ideal rate that we should get to eventually. So it seems weird that we've set it to where now we can't go below 10 without a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they were looking at sustainability of continuing to fill the treasury as money was coming out. That would be my guess. Yeah, I did not actually set the numbers, but I helped review them, and I was like, yeah, that seems reasonable.
I don't think there was any strong opinions. I mean, Chatham House rules, I can't say names of anybody that was in the room, but in general, it was kind of like, well, the rate is 20. We don't really know what happens if we go really high or really low. Why don't we just set some guardrails on either side of that number? And that's kind of what it was.
That's why it's a guardrail, and it's not like
it's not set in stone.
It's not set in stone, exactly. And all you got to do is get 75% of D-reps to vote on it, and you can pass a new constitution with a different set of guardrails.
Yep. New constitution change, new guardrail, provide the new guardrail script, and make sure to provide also the Pluto script with it if you want people to vote for it. That would be a good move to do if you want to go this way.
Or if you really just don't like the guardrails at all, I mean, you can always submit a constitution with no guardrail script.
No.
I think Matt's actually making a fair point. But TAO is a tax, or row is a tax. Excuse me. The Treasury cut is a tax.
Tau.
Yeah, it's a tax on your rewards essentially.
It's
It's a fair
kind of
point.
it's kind of a rebate if you stake. It's a tax rebate because you get back a little more, even though you pay the same every
it's like
transaction.
a cashback credit card or whatever, right? Like if you spend some money on Cardano, you're going to get a certain percentage back. And before we were taking at least 20% of that. Now we're only taking 10% of that. So we've increased your rebate by 12.5%, but yeah, not necessarily decrease the amount that you have to pay at the time of transacting. So,
Well, folks, it was fun. I got to run, but nice
all right.
chatting.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Thank
Good
you,
to see you.
Sam.
Sam.
Bye.
See ya.
But
Yeah, that's a good point. That's exactly what it is. It's literally like a credit card. You're getting cash back for everything you spend. It's literally the same thing.
As long as you sign up for the program, right? You have to be opted in and participating in staking, and so that is the one contingency. So,
What is a Georgist, Matt? I would Google it, but
you
I'm
like
doing
people
a
named
electoral
George.
thing. Yeah, exactly.
so Einstein's in the chat. Hey, buddy, we appreciate all your work on everything. If you want to come hang out, send a DM. We'll get your link in here. But he throws out there. By the way, one concept discussed in drafting was modular constitution and easier change guardrails in terms of voting thresholds. So that's pretty interesting. Rationale was code would likely
Go ahead.
Rationale was code would likely change faster than social contract, and we would need to change guardrails quicker.
Yeah, I think they should be. I have not liked the fact that the guardrails and the guardrail script were just added in. They make sense why we have them, right? Because like there are, Andrew knows, and he's talked about this at length before. There's some things like I think it's like block size, like where we can't go down. Once we go up, that's it. Like we're up, so we have to be very cautious and make sure that nobody can submit something that breaks the blockchain. So like a protocol parameter to set block size to 0 or something. Like we need to not allow that to happen. But at the same time, some of these things like the treasury tax rate shouldn't require um, a full constitutional amendment in order to change where we draw those guardrails. Like we should, or maybe we should have said you can't reduce it by more than 50% at a time, or something to that effect. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of like what Eystein is saying. Of course, it will require a new hard fork and a slight change to the ledger rules, where we would have two documents, one being the Constitution and another one being the guardrails or potentially the guardrail script. And then those could have two different thresholds for their update and modification. So guardrails, for example, might only take 60% approval threshold, whereas a Constitution takes 75, sort of thing.
I would add some stuff to that hard fork though.
Well, yeah, of course we're going to add
Something
hard fork, but like this would be a hard fork. You wouldn't be able to do it without a hard fork. So we would have to update the code, update the ledger, the spec, the documentation for the spec, all those good things, and then do a hard fork.
Yeah, I was wondering, it's been a while, I wondered that if the constitutional committee should have a say on the threshold that's meant to get them out. The threshold for motion of no confidence and update committee, we technically have a say
So if
on
you're
that.
like trying to lower the no confidence threshold so that you could eject the CC, we get to actually rule that that's unconstitutional to change that threshold.
Exactly. That's how it is right now. That's why I'm thinking like you should give that power to the SPOs instead. But since it's within the same array and it was minimum viable governance, they couldn't do it. It was like already set. But maybe in a future hard fork.
Yeah, well, shout out to Eystein, but shout out to Mike for always thinking of ways that this whole governance thing can go off the rails, and constantly playing the adversarial white hat role that you do, testing all these things and figuring out what's broken. But yeah, so we are at our hour. Are we good? Anybody else got any closing thoughts, or should we wrap it with love and flowers to Eystein and everybody else involved in this whole crazy governance experiment?
Do we want to get into the budget, or do we want to leave that for next week? Because I mean, that could be a pretty contentious and nasty.
Yeah,
And,
that's a whole different can of worms. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't know if I got that kind of time today.
It'd be good to have Ryan in here for that one, though. Too.
How much
Okay,
time
what-
do you think one needs to go through the entire budget?
Well, we're going to go line item by line item and clown and support and critique, and everybody's going to give opinion. It's probably going to be a 3-hour SpacePlace, probably. So,
He
let's do
said
that
there's a
next.
budget meeting happening right now.
Yeah, they're doing one of their
Yeah.
open sessions right now. Hopefully,
I
it's
have
more
one more
open
hour.
to community feedback than the DREP compensation workshop was earlier today. So.
We got Marcel in the house from Eternal. What's up, Marcel?
What's up, Marcel? Good to see you, man. Sorry for eating a whole pack of crackers on camera.
That's right. I was eating a bowl of chicken earlier, so like you're all right.
I was eating ribs in the public product meeting.
I was drinking a glass of whiskey.
Well, it's only 2:00 here, Trim. All right, calm down. Like,
Oh, I said that shit. I was like, God damn, Mike, it's early.
It's 10 p.m.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm normally sleeping, so I'm gonna leave you guys. I'm gonna go back to bed.
all right, see you, Mike. Thank you.
Later, bro.
All right,
Thanks,
later.
everybody.
All right. I guess you'll shut it down, Chris.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.